Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask.
Welcome back, everyone. We have another creator conversation with the wonderful Tara Craig, who's joining us today. Tara is a singer, songwriter, and music producer now, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, I was just reading off the stuff. I have known Tara for years. We met back in 2009. Just a long time ago now. We met at work, and we do still work together tangentially. And but you've continued to expand your music career, and we thank you so much for coming and talking to us about that.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with y'all and hang out and talk. So I have, I guess, expanded in that just released a new record. So that, and
yes,
like you were saying, Bill, I think the big difference for me with this one was that I did produce it and engineer it and mix it and, all of that stuff. And that was a huge expansion in my skill set and just, what it takes to make that happen. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, and we've got questions because
Okay,
I know
perfect.
almost nothing about music other than I enjoy listening to it. Daniel's a little more musically inclined than I am, and we've all played with, the Final Cuts and some of the stuff, but I've never really played with Logic or even GarageBand. I don't have the ear for it. Daniel, did you want to kick off? Because I know you had a whole long list of questions.
I wrote some stuff out just because I was curious. So, because you mentioned producing this one, what had you participated in that process in your earlier stuff, or?
Yeah, so the first album that I released, Bill, I think you were at that release party, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't make it to the party, but I was at everything else around it, like the shows.
Yeah.
I went to the shows. You were promoting it and stuff, but kids stuff. I couldn't make it to the release party. So.
Sure. No, I'm just kidding. It happens. But yeah, so that album was, I recorded it at home, which is similar to this latest one. But the primary engineer was my drummer, Marco. And so the band kind of arranged it, and then everybody played their own parts. This one is, I recorded it completely on my own in my home studio, which has come a long way since back then. I think it was 12 or 13 years.
15.
It's a long time ago. Yeah, it's
15
a long time.
years ago.
We don't have to put numbers on things. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's 2013. That album came out in 2010, so we can do that math. It's 13 years. But anyways, so yeah, I put everything. That was the first time I've engineered it and mixed an album. This last one,
and so you did. A whole different... You did each piece individually, laid it all on top of each other, put that all together. Oh boy!
Yeah, and I play every instrument as well, which is kind of cool.
Did you do the drums on the new one? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you do the drums and stuff on the new one? Okay.
The electronic drums, yes. So there's a couple tracks that have electronic drums, which I did all of that. The acoustic drums were Marco, so also same guy from the previous albums.
Cool. Nice. And so how long did that, like from the point of like, I want to make an album to, okay, I'm done. Like how long did that take you?
So long. Like way longer than it should have. And I think, most of the tracking actually was completed within a couple of months. I did the bulk of it in like 3 months. And then as I started really getting into the mixing of it, I would learn new things, and then I'd go back and listen. I'm like, ooh, I can do that better. And so that was a long process. And then I moved kind of midway through that from Oregon to Washington. So I had to like tear down my whole studio, and it took a while to get everything back up and running.
Yeah, that can't help.
Once I ended up setting it back, getting ready to go and start recording again, I decided to actually add like 3 or 4 more tracks. So I was going to do like a 5-song EP. And then I decided, you know what, it's already taken a long time. Let's just go for it and put out a full album. And so then it took, again, longer, but the whole process was about 4 years.
Okay. So this sounds like a
Yeah.
labor of love, or is it a labor of love, or is it something you can't not do? Because
Ooh,
we talk
I
about like the
think,
passions of
yeah,
creators and stuff. Um,
uh, both, I think. I think
okay.
I um, absolutely have to do this, like making music. And for me, maybe even more so than playing out live, which I love to do, being in the studio and creating recordings has actually been a love of mine since I started writing music. One of the first things I
Okay.
figured out how to do, my mom had this like karaoke machine that she would take out, and she was also a singer, and she would perform and go to hospitals and sing for patients. And anyways, so I figured out how to use her equipment to go back and overdub harmonies on my songs. And so from the very beginning, since at the age of 13 when I started writing, that was a huge passion and love of mine. And then I've just kind of tinkered around with it long enough, and then decided, you know what, I really want to learn what I'm doing a little bit. I still don't I didn't go to school for it or anything, but I that 4 years was a lot of digging in and researching and trial and error, to figure out kind of
And
how to
what
do it.
software? I'm assuming it's software. What software did you use to drive it?
Logic. It's all done in Logic.
All done in Logic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know you have a background in Macs in general, so I was wondering if you had gone. Because I know some people like do Pro Tools and other stuff, and
Yeah.
I didn't know where you had decided to branch off into.
Yeah. I took that very logical GarageBand to Logic leap, years ago, uh, and I love it. For me, it makes sense, and I think no matter what it is,
Just go in your bed, and I'll get you some here in a few minutes.
whatever you spend the most time on,
Yeah.
people love Pro Tools or Ableton or whatever, but
Yeah.
Logic for me is my preference.
Sorry, the
Yeah.
kid stuck his head in.
It's all good.
No.
So as far as your writing process goes, are you a lyrics first, or is it music first, or do you?
Yeah, the good question. So it depends on the song, to be honest.
Okay.
Sometimes, but I would say typically, songs and at least half of the lyric or the music and half the lyrics or something will come kind of all at once.
Oh,
But
okay.
that might be, I may have a guitar lick that I'm kind of playing around with for weeks or even a month before it kind of takes a bigger shape of a song. And same thing with lyrics. I may have ideas that are kind of
Mm-hmm.
ruminating, you're kind of thinking about something and write down like a line. But usually if I sit down and write a song, lyrics and music come together. That being said, I also write a lot of music for other people's lyrics, including one of the songs on this record, this third track, Hold My Sail. The lyrics were done by a friend of mine, musician, who's in California now, and that was a co-write we did. So, and I do a lot of that. I haven't done a lot of the reverse where I write the lyrics and then someone else writes music. I've done one of those. So but anyways, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
So, do you have any kind of training or background in writing music? Because I know you said you didn't go to school to like mix and everything, but do you have a musical background other than performing? Like I know some people are just like natural performers, but some people go to school for it.
Yeah. I don't have a music degree by any means. I did take some college level music theory, and I was in a lot of choirs and stuff all through school. But that's kind of the extent of my formal training.
Okay.
So
you have some.
you did.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You said you did choir. Did you do any other instruments in there? Did you like learn piano at a young age or anything like that?
I took piano lessons when I started coming home from church, and I would be playing the songs from the service and kind of pick out how, not full-fledged,
Yeah.
huge arrangements or anything, but I could pick out the melody lines and pluck them out. And so my mom was like, we should get you in piano lessons. And I actually didn't love piano lessons as a kid because I played so much by ear. I struggled to learn the written language of music, and got more into reading music, as in choir doing the vocal lines and things. But,
Oh, okay.
and then playing in church bands, learning how to read chord charts, both for piano and guitar. And that's really like the music I can read that kind of music. If you put like a classical score in front of me, I would be, I might be able to be like, I think that's a D or a C, but that's kind of the extent of it.
Okay. And so you said you played everything. So what else I'm sure you're not perfect at everything, but what else can you noodle
Far
on?
from it.
Yeah.
On the record, I play piano and guitar are my primary instruments. And then I also played bass. That's really it. And some drum programming, but it's just bass, guitar, piano, vocals, and
nice
acoustic and electric guitar.
Okay. Very cool. So, all right. So this is a weird question, but we've talked a lot about visualization and how people perceive things in their heads and stuff. So do you hear the music in your head, or do you have to play it to be able to hear it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it can depend. One thing, as far as like, sometimes I have an idea that it's like almost as you're playing or as you're singing, just kind of in that moment of being open, that like a new idea comes and is almost, it's like in the moment and it didn't necessarily exist before. Other times I may have something in my head that I'm kind of singing or, noodling on before it really becomes a full idea. So I think both are true. One thing that was really cool during the process of creating this record and starting to really, I guess, find a voice as a producer and engineer was the visual, like the way that I could kind of see the music as a landscape almost, like a piece of art. I saw it very, like as I was hearing it, I'm listening for what's in the upper right corner or what's kind of in the background way over here and listening for those sounds. It was a very visual experience for me, and kind of what I was hearing and what I was hearing, then kind of what I wanted to complement what was there already or what I wanted to take out maybe sometimes.
Okay.
So on that, I want to ask you a question that we're asking a lot of people, unless you wanted to ask it, Daniel. You go. Okay. So when you imagine something, let's say you're going to think of Mickey Mouse, right? And you close your eyes. Do you see Mickey Mouse? Or is it like a spreadsheet in your head, like he's this kind of stuff? What
I just
what
did it
happens in your mind
to see what would happen. Yeah, I visually see Mickey Mouse as you start saying those words.
Okay.
Okay.
So then when you say that you're visualizing the sound, are you actually creating some sort of in your head? Are you seeing it, or is it just, I don't even know how to ask that question. Can you explain what you see more then?
I'm going to try because I think it's a really cool concept even to talk about it, because maybe not something I've given a lot of voice to or tried to explain. So great question. I think like if I'm sitting like, listening either with speakers or headphones and just kind of closing my eyes and listening, I sort of place the sounds in a location.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you can, and I'm not seeing necessarily like notation. No, not at all. I'm not seeing notation. None of that. It's really more abstract, thinking of like, okay, if these are colors, where is it really bright or where is it too dark? Where do I need more depth? What part of this painting do I want there to be maybe more negative space or positive space, etc. And so I'm kind of plotting it out almost as if I had a paintbrush and was kind of, that's how I see it. If that makes
sense. So do you, because I'm trying to think of, this is so alien to me, this aspect of it, because the way I experience music is a little bit different. I have music videos that run in my head. Like I'll have imagery that has nothing to do with the song whenever I hear one that goes through my head.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it feels like, and tell me if I'm completely wrong, you're almost kind of assigning abstract shapes to the sounds, like this is the drum line, this is the electric guitar, this is the vocals, and it feels like you're almost moving it around like it was a GUI 3D interface type of thing. Is that kind of what it is, or is it waveform, or
No, I think that's pretty close. But I would say, yeah, not necessarily shapes like you would think of like circles or squares, but maybe more like you said, the waveform.
Okay.
And kind of like, how does it make you feel? So like you hear a sound and maybe it makes you feel energized, or it makes you feel, like, okay, where do I want more energy in this painting? Where do I want more, or do I want it to be more soothing? So those are the kind of things I'm thinking about. And it would be misleading to say I have like an actual picture,
Fair
but
enough.
it's just kind of how I conceptualize it while I'm listening to it, if that.
So is that the same when you're just listening as a passive observer of someone else's music? Do you do sort of the same thing, or do you address it differently at that time?
I think it depends on the intention that I have behind the music. Sometimes
Okay.
like it's not like I'm just driving in my car and I have to pull over and I'm over, like, I mean, I'm open to that happening, but that's not very common. Usually I'm just singing and having a good time. But that being said, I also, like, if you were to send me something you wanted me to check out, I'm probably not going to pull it up on my phone like right now and listen to it. I want to like carve out some time to really sit with and actually listen to that piece of music, because I do notice that when I like, that is going to be a better experience for me. I'm going to get more out of it versus just like multitasking. And to your point, Daniel, that's kind of like when I have those moments is when I'm really being intentional about listening to music.
Okay.
It's kind of almost like a practice, I guess.
Yeah. And do you, and so when you're thinking about when you're driving in the car and you're thinking about the thing that you recorded, are you sort of seeing that as you're thinking like, oh, that should be that's what needs to be brighter, I can see it now later?
Yeah.
Okay.
That definitely happens for sure.
Okay.
A lot, actually. And that's one of those things where when it took so long for me to make this record, because like the engineer that I was at the start versus, who I hopefully continue to grow into, heard things that I didn't hear 2 years ago. Right. Or I heard it, but I didn't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And then and so getting to the point where you can be like, ooh, I want it to sound more like this. And then know how to execute it. That starts to get really fun,
Yeah. You go back.
I'm barely there.
You didn't even realize it was wrong until you figured it out. And you went like, oh, I need to do this thing to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Or I knew it wasn't what I wanted, but I couldn't figure out how to get from A to B. Right. I just knew like there's a chasm here, and
yeah, I'm missing a tool that I don't have, and then
you have to work this. It's almost like you have to put in the reps to figure out how to do the different things, like anything else, which makes sense. I mean, I don't think about it that way because I know nothing about it. But then you describe it, I'm like, well, obviously you have to do it to get better at it, right?
Yeah. And literally, there's a service. I have signed up for it. I have not done it as often, just like most of us with many gym memberships. Right? We know we need to go to the gym, but there's a service called Tone Gym, and that is exactly the whole idea. And you listen to a clip, and you have to identify the type of reverb, or can you pick the frequency this is at? And that's the whole idea, is to train your ear and to get sharper. So you can find those things and fix them.
That's awesome. That something like that even exists. And to think that, 20 years ago that wouldn't have even been a thing, technology wise, or it would have been massively expensive because you would have had to go somewhere to sample the stuff. And so I know there's a lot of growth that you've done between your first album and this one, but what is and I want to hear a little bit about that. But what is like the tech done as far as like, was it easier to cut this album? Now, I not that it was easy, but compared to the first one you did,
Yeah.
because I know you, like you said, your studio's improved and these kind of things. Is this something that could you have built this studio 13 years ago, the one that you have now? Because
Great. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a really good question. And I honestly, I think no, because one of the things, well, I think it would have cost a lot more, you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
and part of that is acquiring things over time,
Mm-hmm.
but the technology that we have as consumers is incredible, right? The fact
Mm-hmm.
that that these artists like Billie Eilish, right, her and her brother can do that album in their house. I think their first album they did at home,
Mm-hmm.
like that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that was starting, 13, 15 years ago, and um, but I think today, like the technology is so much better. Our computers are so much better. You can do
Mm-hmm.
so much more with less without the official formal studio.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece, and this I think has been incredible and absolutely made this album possible, is the ability to work, the internet, the ability to work over the internet. And so the the drums were played by Marco, who is my longtime drummer and friend who works in Austin, who lives in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not come out here and record them at the house. He just sent me everything. I would listen back and I'd send him back notes. And as you can probably assume, that takes more time because we weren't
Mm-hmm.
in a room together where I could say, oh, I love that, do that again. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
he would record the whole thing, send it to me. I'd listen and be like, okay, yeah, that part there, I love that, do that again, but change these other parts. And, so
Mm-hmm.
that back and forth was a long and tedious process. And yet it is possible because
Mm-hmm.
of the, technology that we have. And I love that. That's to me like a mind blowing thing that I can record music with friends and colleagues from all over the world. I've recorded music, like done projects with people in other countries and stuff, and that's really cool.
Well,
So
oh, go ahead.
I hang on. So I know that it's takes longer, but would you say that there's a benefit in the time that because there is so like is it better that it takes longer or is it better that if you just like did it real quick together in a room?
You know, I think it's a yes and a
Okay.
different situations warrant different results. For me personally, I loved being able. My previous album, I did an EP in Austin in 2012, and that's the only in studio album I've done. And you go in with a budget, and you have however
Mm-hmm.
many days you can afford, however
Mm-hmm.
many hours you can afford. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't love that take, it doesn't matter because you're out of time and money. So I loved being able to take the time to get things where I felt like, where I was happy with them, where I was proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was critical in this situation, it was positive. At some point, it started to become a negative where I was like, okay, I just need to set a deadline because you can hear things that you want to change and do over all day long, every day, right? And
Yeah.
so I started giving myself these arbitrary deadlines, like you're going to finish this by December 5th. And I ended up having to do a few things in January, but just because I needed to get it out there. And
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
as creatives, it's like for me at least, then it becomes this blockage. Like it's just sitting in
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
And every time I want
Yeah.
to sit down and write something new or whatever, it's this album, this record, I got to get this done.
Yeah.
So I just need to get it. I had to kick it out of
Yeah,
the nest at
it
at a
sounds
certain
like
point.
a similar trap to aspiring authors who won't put a novel down Like they keep working on the same one over and over and over again. And
Yep.
one of Daniel's and my favorite authors, Jim Butcher, and what he says is, write the novel, put it aside, do the next one. Write the novel, put it aside, do the next one. And he talks, so you're literally getting your reps in, because he's like, if you just massage the novel indefinitely, it'll never be done, because you always want to do something. Like you're saying, there's always something more to do. And at some point you just have to be like, here's my thing. Right.
Yep. And so I think that sometimes is the beauty of having the deadline of the studio time or the production in the publishing company saying, we need it by now, we need it by yesterday or whatever, because you do push through, and that can be really great. So that's why I say I think it's yes. And I also think there's something that can happen. See, I did all of, like I said, I did all the instrumentation myself, except for Marco and I working remotely. But there is something really magical that I think I would love to have more in future records, is that getting other musicians together in a space for a certain amount of time. We have a week to put this together. And there's just that kind of magic of the in the moment dynamic that, I think you miss in something like what I did this time, which is that long drawn out process. But
that makes sense. There's an energy of people being in the room that's different. It's like you said, we have the technology to do this, and you can produce something amazing this way. It's almost, to me, it sounds like, do you want Italian or Mexican? Right? They're both good.
Exactly.
But they're both very different, potentially.
But there is something special about sitting in a room and and doing it. So you said you did a studio record before. How much time did you end up taking in the studio?
I'm trying to remember. I feel like we had 3 days maybe. And
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
We had like a setup night, and then 3 days, and then a teardown. And so yeah, it goes so fast. And I mean, we knew the songs, we were tight. It wasn't like bad, there's things I love, but it also felt pretty limiting at that. I don't know, looking back, like, again, there's a lot of benefit of being able to take time to go back and say, ooh, we can do this part better, or let's try this something different. And if you have no more hours, you can't do that. Right.
So now this is okay. So if you guys know the songs, you feel tight, you go in and record the set. How was it, like, how many did y'all do? 6 or 8 or
5? I think it's 5.
Okay. So that's 25, 30 minutes of playtime. Like, so it doesn't, I mean, that's 3 days. So like, what is it that
takes so long?
This I'm sure, I mean, I know there's setup in between and there's recording issues and all that stuff, but like, you get one take, and then what makes one better than the next, and why do you need to do so many, and what are you chasing, and kind of thing. Yeah.
So in this case of the studio recording I did, we did not record live. So that's and most albums are not recorded with everyone playing at the same time.
Okay.
Okay.
And so that is a huge part of what takes so long, because I have to you have what's usually called like a now of course I can't even think of the term, like a scratch track.
Okay.
And that might be, depending on what you need, it could be just an acoustic guitar and a vocal, and everyone else then goes in and builds their layers on top of that. And so then usually what happens is the vocals are done last, after you have everything kind of built, and then you go back in and lay those vocals down on top of the hopefully pretty good sounding song at that point. But everybody does multiple takes, and that takes a long time to build those layers.
So is that just for a clarity of recording, that it's just easier to record everybody individually rather than try to partition it off? And and I mean, so like, you go back and look at old, 60s and 70s stuff, they were all recording at the same time. Why have we just shifted because of the technology? and it's just easier to do it this
Um,
way now, or
I think that is, you might be thinking of certain albums that were recorded that way, but not
okay.
that, but we've been recording like this for a really long time. So it
Oh,
really
okay.
depends on the studio, the style that you're going for. But people still, I mean, that is still done today, where people
Okay.
will go in and do everything live. So it just depends on the engineer and the band and
Interesting. Okay.
really the kind of the vibe that they're going for.
Okay.
Now, for your studio album or the EP that you did you have like someone there listening, producing, making decisions, or were you the one who was doing that when you recorded like in the studio? Because you always see the studios in the movies, and there's that guy in the thing going, no, more of this, less of that, and I have no idea what they're talking about,
Yeah.
but I imagine they're mixing stuff. Um, so who was running that
So
for you
yeah,
when you were in the studio?
so we had the engineer and producer. His name's Britton, and his studio is Ramble Creek. It's in Austin. It's a great studio. They put out some really cool things, and so he's engineering and acting as a co-producer. I mean, I think everyone in
Okay.
the band at the time there's three of us. We're all having influence on what goes on each track, right? The
Mm-hmm.
arrangement of the songs. But then after the fact, when we leave the engineer's making the decision on what kind of reverb, what mic are we going to use? Do we want to record this um, live, or do we want to partition everybody off? What's the kind of the sound?
Mhm.
They're making those decisions. Do I want to mic the amps? How do I mic the amps? Um, do we
Yeah.
need those darker tones or brighter tones? And so usually they're kind of the one painting the picture. As an
Mm-hmm.
artist, you're going to have say, absolutely. But uh, what was so, I think, cool for me in this process of the latest record was that I was making all of those decisions. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we talked about that magic that happens in the live room and with that group of people. I think for me, what was really magical about this recent project, thinking of the other side of the kind of pendulum, was it was really a process of me kind of finding my voice and
Hmm.
going with my own decisions, not being influenced, whether it's by another band member saying, oh, I think we should do it this way, or by a
Mm-hmm.
sound engineer. It was really me making those decisions and kind of painting that picture solo, which yields
Hmm.
specific results, right? Some things, not
Yeah.
that I
Mm-hmm.
think, not that I want every project to be that way. I think that would be a very lonely way to work for the rest of my career. But I think for this particular project, it was really important to kind of be that, to be the solo voice, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Um,
that,
So
that makes sense.
now that you've found that voice, are you excited now to go and like mix it up with a group again
yeah,
and have other people play along?
absolutely. I actually have a new project. I don't know if it'll become anything, but some friends here on the island, um, playing music, writing music together. And so that's exciting. When it comes to my own solo stuff, yeah, I think the next thing I would really love to do is to have a band um,
Hmm.
that, we're playing, that I get a little bit more. It's good to have outside influence, right? I want to still
Yeah.
be
Mm-hmm.
able to call the shots on my music, but we're all better when we can collaborate. So I think
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
now that you've done some of the producing, the mixing, and making decisions on that side of the thing, because I'm thinking of like actors who start to direct, right? And they kind of shift into
uh
that other thing. Do you have that bug? Do you have the desire now to try and maybe produce for another group of musicians? Like, are we going to see,
absolutely.
Jane Doe and the John Smiths produced by Tara Craig at some point? Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
Yeah, that is for me. I think that's kind of the dream. I would love to and continue to grow my skills and hone, my ear, like we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about, put it in the reps um, and work with other artists. When I hear people's music, I have ideas. I'm like, oh, it would be kind of, that certain friends that I'd love to start with them by letting them letting me kind of cross that bridge and make try that. I would love to do that. And long term, that'd be awesome to be able to like actually have a full-fledged studio and produce other artists.
Cool.
That would be cool. So you pressed a vinyl.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you press a vinyl these days?
Yes, I have one
so cool.
right over. I have one on my shelf. Yeah.
Nice. Went through a Portland-based pressing company called Atomic Disc, and they, from what I can understand, actually send it overseas, which was a bit of a disappointment because I thought they made everything local. But from one of the things, it looks like in my research that's pretty standard. Is that a lot of them are getting pressed. I don't really know, but not here.
Somewhere,
in like Europe,
not
places
here.
in Europe and.
Oh, in Europe, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it was a really cool process. As far as for like my part of it, it's not that different than putting music on a CD or cassette, as a lot of people have started doing again, which
really
blows my mind.
Sense.
Like,
yeah,
I get the return to vinyl. I
Yes.
don't totally get the return to cassette.
Yeah.
But I think it does speak to the fact that people are really craving tangibles in a world where everything is so abstract in the streaming world. I think I love the convenience of it. I love not having books of hundreds of CDs that I'm trying to fumble through in my car. But I also, when I go to see somebody play, I want to buy their music. I want to support them. So vinyl for me is a really great way to do that. And but from an artist perspective, the big distinction is the master. So you have to create a separate master that's for vinyl. And otherwise, it's a pretty...
so I'm guessing the master for vinyl just has a broader sound profile than it would for CD?
Yeah, it's that.
Okay.
And I didn't really... I was involved in that process, but I had a mastering engineer that I worked with. And that was really, really a cool experience, but he did a great job.
You mentioned that you mentioned.
Do you have to record differently for vinyl?
Not that I'm aware. From my understanding, it's more in the mastering. Now, I think that being said, there's probably things that wouldn't translate as well, just depending on the quality of the recording itself. But I didn't do anything. I just did everything in the highest quality I could at the time of production. And
bigger files, raw files, as much data as possible is what it sounds like, and as little compression. I know a tiny little bit about that from like the old Windows days and stuff where we had to like decompress and recompress stuff. You mentioned the tangibles and
it's
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that it's just cool in the engineering, the mastering process, like those engineers are listening for, and that's what really gives the final polish to anything that we hear, is that mastering process. Tangibles.
Sorry. You mentioned the tangible thing, and it's interesting because I am anything but an audiophile, right? I'm not the hipster movement, all this stuff. But it's interesting because there are nights when I come home and I take the music that's on my phone and I send it to my HomePod speaker things, and that's great. But then there are those nights where it's like, I want it to be quieter. You kind of cut the lights off, you put the candles on, and I get out your album or one of the other albums.
Or a whiskey.
And what's really neat, exactly. And you're on the couch, the kids are down, and it's just it's a different experience. And even the little bit of the scratch on the record, it's just, and maybe that's nostalgic for me because I grew up listening to records with my parents. But it's a different sound. It's a different sound coming out of my record player than it is out of my, probably more expensive speakers and my
Well,
streaming
it
stuff.
Yeah.
literally is a different
is.
sound. I mean, they reduce that
Mhm.
audio waveform so much to compress it down into that file that
Yep.
it
Yep.
is
Yeah,
We
a
it feels
much
lose
more
richer.
so
robust
much
sound.
quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I
nowadays,
guess,
fortunately, we have lossless and all these other things that help with that. But still, it's not the same as just having it on this. It isn't.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if y'all haven't listened to the
Tangibles.
record, go listen to the record, guys. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Tara has a magical voice. We haven't really talked about her music specifically, but she does has a magical voice. Before we end, I'm going to share a little anecdote about that. But what inspired you? Because I know we started working together and training together way back when. What inspired you to take the leap from I'm performing live music in Austin, right? Because it's a music town, to I'm going to cut an album. What was that? Exciting? Was that nervous? Was that anxious? Is that something you've been wanting to do for a long time? I mean, what was the journey like from, because Austin has a lot of musicians, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who play live
Yeah.
music in Austin. And I know people who played live music for years and they love it, but they've never considered taking that next step. So what was that journey like for you?
Yeah. I think I don't know for sure. Like if I think about other people, most people who I have known, been friends with over the years, if they're writing original music, whether as a solo artist or with a band, cutting a record is like that's what you want to do. Like that
Okay.
is your goal. And now it looks a little different nowadays because it can be putting up a single. It can be, there's a lot of variation to that, but I think that's definitely a driving force for anyone who's actively creating music and sharing music. So for me, it was definitely like um, that was the goal. That was the next step. So I had been playing music for many years before I moved to Austin. And um, once I had a band together, or had a band, and we were, things were coming together in that way. It was like that was the next step and what we wanted to do. And I've always recorded music and I've always shared it, whether it was using my mom's karaoke machine and making cassettes at the time, going back to that. So those were the tangibles I started with, and I would just hand out cassette tapes to my friends at school. And
Oh yeah.
I'm sure there are some of those floating around somewhere in the ether. So yeah.
So how old were you when you were handing out cassettes then?
13, 14.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Oh, so there's some Tara Craig
So
bootlegs
this has
floating
been
around out there.
Yeah, I think so.
So this has been a bug for a while then.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
okay.
Started writing at a really young age. Well, 13, I started writing and
Yeah.
playing, and kind of going back to something that's been, I think, a thread in our conversation is the passion that I do have for the recording piece of it, because I wasn't the 13, 14-year-old who was like at every party, let me get my guitar out and play for you. I did that on my time, record, and then gave it, here's this music, take it and listen to it. So the creating the record of the music
Yeah.
has always been a big part of the passion for me.
Was there an album that like that gave you that passion? You heard an album and thought, this is it and I want to do this? Or
Man, I don't know exactly, but I will say probably one of the most influential albums for me as a songwriter was Joni Mitchell's Blue. That, yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right? That's just like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, this is amazing. And yeah, there's been many after that, of course, but yeah, just as a singer-songwriter, you're telling these, just writing music and having people hear it is where it's at. So to answer your question, Bill, yeah, that's why we did it. That's why, and I will just continue putting music out probably in some form or fashion until I die.
That's awesome. And I'm so happy, not just for musicians, but for musicians, for authors, for poets, podcasters, for whatever we call the YouTubers now. it has become so much easier to self-publish without needing an organization to do it. So, I mean, just the fact that we're podcasting, like we talked about trying to do this like
Exactly.
5 years ago, we couldn't have afforded to get the stuff. Now we can. So this is really exciting for all this. And one of the reasons we're asking some of this is we interviewed somebody who had written a book, and they said if they ever do it again, they're going to do it themselves because they know the distributors, they know how to hire the people, and they don't need the production company. So it sounds like a lot of what you've done. You're doing all your own distribution? Because I know a lot of your stuff is you have CDs for some things, but a lot of it is like I get your stuff on iTunes and places like that.
So there are the like independent artists distributors, like groups that offer those services. CD Baby is who I've used for years.
Okay.
And I think they actually also do book publishing potentially. I mean, I don't think they would call it CD Baby, but anyways, and you know, it's great. They pay it's a service or pay one-time fee, and then it goes to all of the digital platforms. I can choose, who exactly, but Amazon, Pandora, Spotify, everything, it's all included. And they used to actually distribute physical music as well. So you could send them your CDs or vinyl and they would keep them in their warehouse and ship them out for you. But they stopped doing that because I think probably there's two reasons. One, less people buy those things. And two, I can do that all myself. Like you were saying.
So do you make any money from the streaming platforms at all? Is it $5 or?
Are you going to retire and do that full time? I mean,
oh man, and that is a whole can of worms, right? And then there's some new changes being proposed by Spotify right now that are pretty.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
We'll see what happens, but essentially, no, I don't make it. I mean, I think that for a stream of my song, for any one of my songs, I make like 0.00007.
Wow. Okay.
So this is where the passion comes in, right? This is
where the day job comes in.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, I mean, this is what you have to love it. You've got to love it to do it, right? Because Daniel and I were kind of joking at first because we were like, "Oh, we finally got enough that we could qualify for the monetized thing," and we made like 13 cents. And it's, but we're still doing the stuff. I mean, it's interesting. What drives people to do that stuff is fascinating for me. Because we all have day jobs and we're doing that to pay the bills, but this is where you dump a lot of your energy in a good way, right? This is where you're focusing a lot of that. Which leads to, and I'm sure you've had them, leads to some interesting conversations at work, right? Because I get conversation in my day job. It's like, why aren't you putting your energy into this? It's like, because that's not where my focus is. Right?
Because I don't want to be so tired at the end of the day that I don't want to come and do this podcast, right? Or I don't want to go into the studio and practice. And it's definitely I think a struggle that many of us know, as far as just balancing your passion with what pays the bills. And it's the dream to shift those scales a little bit, right? I'm sure if this podcast took off tomorrow and started paying the bills, it's like, thank you. Okay. I'm not going to argue with you. But we don't do it for the money. Wouldn't hurt to make some good money doing
it. Like our goal is to have it make enough money to pay for microphones. It's like
it's like it'd be nice to be able to afford equipment and then and then maybe a place to record. Like that would be crazy, but pipe dreams.
So I know you've done
some of these things can start to happen.
I know you've done a couple of world
Fingers
tours.
Crossed.
Over the years, right?
World tours.
I thought it was amazing the way you leveraged like your day job to do those as well. Are we looking at any kind of tour dates? Are you going to be coming back to Austin to play anything? Do you look at that? Like, I understand you have to work around your day job, but are you looking at, now that you've got the record out, and I don't know what the creative process is, but Are you wanting to get out there to try and do some new stuff? What does that look? What's the future look like for like where I can go see Tara
Yes.
Craig play live?
I would love to have some Texas dates in 2024, and other places as well. They'll probably be very strategically focused. Austin being a big one. I have a drummer there. I have people who might come out, right, to see the show. So, and I can work while I'm there. That's a win-win. So hopefully make that one happen. Other places, Utah, Colorado, where I have friends and places to stay and know people. So yeah, I was hoping to do a small, I had planned on doing kind of a small tour, really small, just maybe a handful of dates this summer. And we had some family things, kind of larger extended family that prevented that. But absolutely want to make it happen. That is the goal. So
nice.
Hopefully I'll have something you can share on this podcast in coming months.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. We will. Have you thought about trying to come back and play in and around like ACL or South by or any of the big Austin things, or would you rather try and come and do it when it's not that insane and crazy? Which one do you prefer? Because I know you've done stuff around there before.
Yeah, if I had some connections and in conversation there was some actual great, South by shows, for example, and unofficial stuff, like I've had some really great South by shows, and I've had some really terrible ones. And so okay. I think if I had something that was going to be worth it, then I might consider coming at one of those busier times. But in general, I know enough musicians in town, and there's so much music happening in Austin that it's pretty hard to have a wrong time,
Yeah,
I know.
I'd prefer to come in more quiet.
A place I would love to see you play, and I don't know if you ever got to see it. There's this little place in downtown Round Rock called the Alcove Cantina, and it's the old original cantina from the 1890s, and they have live music like Fridays and Saturday nights in the back, and it's this big old Adobe Western looking thing with no roof, so it's just like 3 walls and then the stage is at the back. So next time you're in town, you should definitely check it out. That
sounds great.
For your kind of music, it's a very small, intimate place. It seats about 60 people, maybe 100 max. So it's real tight, real small, real intimate. And I've seen loud bands play there, and that's almost too much because it reverbs off the walls. But how would you what genre would you classify your music? How do you? Because I've always had trouble defining. Like if somebody's like, "Well, what kind of music does she play?" I'm like, "You have to listen to it, right?" Because I have trouble putting you in a box, Tara. You have such an interesting type of music.
I will say thank you, because that I think is part of the way I write. Is I'm not writing for a specific sound. And some people like that, right? They like that they can put on my record, and even though it's 9 songs, there's sort of this journey of feel and genre almost that and other people, that's going to not be their thing, and that's okay. But I think the primary classification that I've come to use is singer-songwriter, because most people get, okay, this is that means something. Typically they play, whatever the main instrument is, they're probably the person playing that, whether it's guitar or piano or banjo, whatever. And it's original, kind of more lyric based music. Beyond that, usually like folk, but folk isn't totally feel right, because it's so broad, it's so almost generic. But alternative and adult contemporary. Which feels so awful.
That one. That's
right?
so. I refuse to let you call it adult contemporary. That feels.
I'll call it pop.
It just means we're adults and we're listening to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I used to always go by indie folk pop,
Yeah, that seems about
especially when I
right.
had a band. So I think that's, that's kind of,
I know.
Yeah.
I
it's a hard
reach for
thing.
your albums when I've had a rough or a stressful day. There's something about your voice, and this is one of the things that people ask me what kind of singers I like. I like all kinds of crazy music, and it's fine if they do all the stuff and they mix it all. But for me, the artists that I just fall toward are like the way you can sing it, the way Johnny Cash could, the way Marty Robbins could, George Strait. These people who can take a microphone and maybe an acoustic guitar, but they don't need it, and the music comes out. So if you've ever watched the George Strait movie, I can't remember the name of it, but he's all like overproduced, and at the end he's like, "I just want my guitar and sing." Right? Those are the artists that I go to when like I've had a rough day and I just need to let it all bleed out. And there's a magic to their kind of voices, and yours specifically. And I want to share this because Tara's music was life changing for my family. My oldest son is autistic. I've talked about that, and he went through some really rough times where he was having meltdowns, and we hadn't figured out his meds and everything. And one of the things that I could do if he was having his horrible nights is put on your first album on repeat, and he'd be able to fall asleep. It would all bleed out, and it was like a balm, for lack of a better way to put it. And we found some other albums that did that, but it was all that same kind of artist where I know I go watch them on a mic on a karaoke machine, and music's going to come out, right? As opposed to like people who need like auto tune to sing or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I do think though thank you, because honestly, like that's something that you've always shared with me over the years, and it's like when I need something to anchor to and remind myself, like, is this worthwhile? Does anybody care? Like those moments, they keep me going. So thank you for always, sharing that, and I'm so grateful that was your experience. And I love the term that you used, like a balm. And I think that is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the voice is a huge part of it, because there is a specific kind of tone and register, at least for, depending on the person, that just kind of hits just right. That's very soothing. And then I also think, at least for me, that is a huge part of my intention behind my music, is I want it to hit in that way. Not in a, like, not necessarily in like, it's going to make you cry or anything, but just, I want my music to be very healing for people in whatever way it is for them. And I think there are some people who, their calling is to make people dance. Right. And
I
they
love
do
that
it
stuff too.
well, and it's amazing. And you just, and so it's not like you were saying, it's not better that it's like Italian or Mexican. Right. But at least the kind of music that I've done, and probably will always do, I think I want that, I want it to be a balm for people. So
yeah,
thank you for
for me,
sharing
you
The
that.
word
fall.
that comes to me as peaceful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, you
It's a
fall
great
into the
way.
same kind of music as like Johnny Cash's "Hurt." That kind of like, it's not really a genre, but
Such a good,
it's a tone type
yeah.
of music. It's a sound. But like, you're right. If I want to exercise, I put on the Eye of the Tiger. Right. If I want to dance and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
have a wild time, I turn on the Shakira song or whatever. And it all has it, like you
Yeah.
said, it all has its place. But I guess where am I going with that? And again, I'm a little retrospective right now because, like I told you before, I had a funeral yesterday and all that kind of stuff. So, um, it's I'm just fascinated by people who can create this stuff, because I've always struggled with like, what's my creative? I've always been a doer or a facilitator on things, as opposed to like I don't come up with the idea. I can execute somebody's idea, right? But I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's the inspiration, and the closest I've gotten is woodworking, but I'm still doing stuff off of plans and things like that. So it amazes
Yeah.
me that someone can, like, music can happen, and I'm just like, where does that come from? You know, uh, and which is part of why we're interviewing a bunch of creatives, because it's fascinating to me. I'm rambling.
So cool.
I know Daniel has like real
it's
questions.
No, it's good. It's all good. I was just it's interesting because we were going back to the perception thing about, because I don't have any of that, so I don't hear music in my head. I don't have visual imagery of any kind. I it's all blank for me. I'm a weirdo. But a lot of the music that I listen to, it's because I know the lyrics, so I like sing along with stuff, and that's just sort of how I enjoy it. But then I also do, there's something about instrumentals and calm music that I like. It's, you can feel it, but like you can feel the intent there, but like it's an unknown quantity that you can share an emotion with sound.
Yeah, it's a really incredible
Yeah.
thing that exists.
There's a specific type of instrumental. It's a specific soundtrack, and I can see the entire movie in my head. And it's the 1980s Conan the Barbarian that Arnold Schwarzenegger did, and I think it's one of the most beautiful music videos, because if you have ever watched the movie and really paid attention to it, it's a 2-hour movie with 5 minutes of dialogue. It's all visual and sound. It tells the whole movie. In fact, I have the director's cut. They added one scene and it doubles the dialogue in the film. It goes from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. But I can literally put that on and just watch the movie on repeat in my head, and it's that like iconic music, kind of like if you put on the Beethovens, or if you put on the Ride of the Valkyries, or there's those certain musics that it doesn't really matter who you are. It's there.
Man. Like,
yeah,
he's one of the best. You can't. Yeah, that track is amazing.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff is fascinating to me, how those musics can move things through, and you can kind of hear it and see it and follow the story. And I don't know, it's just interesting.
Pretty incredible. I mean, even as someone who makes music, when you stop and think about it, it's just like, whoa, I can't believe that's possible, right? And I think the same thing about pretty much any creative thing, to be able to, just that we have that capacity, and that
just the fact that you can, that someone can, like, 4 people can get together and like bang on some strings and stuff, and then the Beatles, and you're like, wait a minute, what?
It's like, what? Yeah, exactly. It's super cool.
It's also, for me, it's one of our early art forms, and I wonder, because one of the things we talk about a lot on our podcast is like early hominids and development, and we think they were much more developed than we thought they were, and we're finding a lot of that stuff out.
It's got to be the earliest.
Because we know there's early painting that wasn't Homo sapien, that Neanderthal did it, right? So they had to have made sound too. There had to have been like communication and song, and we see orangutans and chimps bang sticks together to make sound and play and do stuff. And if they've been given instruments, they'll use them. So it's such a primal experience to try and put that out there. And even people who can't play music or sing, like in a large group, this is something that fascinates me about like church choirs and things like that, or how you will go in and people will sing a hymn and nobody could carry a tune in a bucket.
Yeah.
But it works in this large group, and you all just kind of come together.
Have you seen the YouTube videos of the guy who plays the audience and gets them to half steps and stuff, and he starts doing pentatonics with them? Like, he'll get groups to, and it's just,
that sounds really cool.
3,000 people in a stadium, and it almost brings you to tears because everybody's singing.
Wow.
It's
so I've been a part of a show that was similar, based on what you've described. One of I don't know if either of you are familiar with Brandi Carlile. She's kind of pretty popular now, but back in the day, the first time I ever saw her was at Hogue Auditorium on UT campus. And at that point, I think it was just playing as a 3-piece, and anyways, the point is they have a song and they break out everybody into parts and they kind of do what you just described, Daniel. And it was amazing to have that happen in this huge crowd of people. And what you're talking about sounds, I mean, next level, like really amazing. But I think that's actually one of the things I get sad about is as someone who is sort of known as a vocalist, as a singer, people say a lot of times like, well, I can't sing. Oh, I can't sing. Oh, that's, and it's like, no, like to Bill's point, when like singing in a group, that's, I think it's like this thing we're meant to do. We're meant to use our voice and to feel the reverb in our mouth. You know, that's just like, it's a thing that we're supposed to do as humans. And so, we got to do it more. You know, you don't have to have a super strong voice, but sing with others. It's very good for us.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great place to stop. Let's stop right
there.
there.
That's amazing.
That's perfect.